Today we'll start with your second unit, which basically focuses first of all on the investment policies of banks and loan policies of banks.
Correct.
So we'll go on to discuss about these two aspects today. Tomorrow onwards we'll go on to discuss about the other parts. So first one is your investment policies. Now one thing we must have to find out how banks are being involved in investment avenues. Now we have pointed out that banks as public institutions actually have mobilized the surplus funds from those who have surplus money with them. And the banks then go on to utilize those mobilized funds by way of lending and also by way of investment. So investment is considered to be one of the sources of income for the banking institutions. But here, the funds to be invested by the banks are basically the public funds. That is the reason why whenever the investment policy is to be formulated, it has to be formulated with utmost caution, with utmost care to ensure that the public funds can never be lost. Because loss of that investment will lead to loss of the public funds. That is the reason why, while going on to discuss about the investment policies of a bank, we need to find out what are the different avenues where the banks can invest their funds and what should be the formulation of the investment policy. Or in other words, we have to find out what are the key aspects of the investment policy of a bank. Now, as you know, whenever investment is to be made, either by an individual or by any entity, that means the business organizations or any organization, you can find that there has to be certain objective for which the investment is supposed to be made. Without having any objective, nobody can go on to invest funds. If as an individual you are supposed to invest in share market, there has to be some objective behind it. If as an individual you have to go on to invest in some real assets or you can say that in properties, then automatically there should be some objective behind it. In the similar fashion, whenever banks go on to invest the funds which they have mobilized from the public after providing loans and advances, the banks also need to set certain objectives. So coming to the key components of the investment policy, or you can say key aspects. The first one is objective setting. What type of objective the banks need to set to formulate
Excuse me, sir. Sir, objective and
objective setting, not
set.
ad.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So what type of objective is being set by the banks? The first and foremost objective behind any investment is to optimize the return. You are supposed to get some return on your investment because return is always associated with the investment. So first and foremost objective is to optimize the return. And at the same time, because the banks are supposed to invest the public funds, they need to ensure that whatever funds they are investing, it should be safe. Because you know that in case of each and every investment avenue, there is the association of certain risk. Even if you keep your money in banks, there is also some amount of risk being involved there. You are putting your money in the form of investment in share market, you are undertaking certain risks. So each and every type of investment is associated with some risk. Therefore, while trying to formulate an investment policy, the banks need to ensure that they will go on to minimize the risks which are being involved in the investments. For that, what they need to do, they need to diversify the portfolio, diversify the investment amount. They should not go on to invest in one particular avenue, in one particular area. They need to diversify the investment for the purpose of minimizing the risk so that they can ensure the safety of the funds as they are dealing with public funds. Another objective is basically your liquidity. If you are investing, that doesn't mean that you are investing for an indefinite period. At your time of requirement, you should be able to liquidate that investment. Whenever you are investing your money, one of your objective is to have liquidity on that investment. Because liquidity means requirement of funds, the meeting of payment obligations. As the bank is dealing with public funds, the bank doesn't know at what point of time the public will come and ask for money. So they should be ready enough. We have already discussed that while discussing the principles of banking. For that reason, whenever they go on to invest their money, they need to ensure the liquidity of those investment also. That means they should go on to invest in such areas where at times of requirement they can go on to liquidate that investment. They can withdraw that investment. So liquidity is another part. Another objective is legal requirements. Because the banks are under the supervision of RBI in India, as
The
well as
legal.
legal requirements. The first one is optimize return. Second one is risk management. Third one is liquidity. Fourth one is legal requirements. These all will come under the objective setting.
ସାର୍ ଆଉ ଥରେ ଥରେ ଟିକେ ପଏଣ୍ଟ ଗୁଡାକ କହିଦେବେ
Optimize return. Then second one is risk management. Third one is liquidity. Fourth one is legal requirement. By legal requirement, what do you mean? As I have already pointed out that banking institutions, since are considered to be public institutions, as they are dealing with public money, they are supposed to be monitored as well as supervised by an apex institution. And the apex institution is in the form of the central bank of that country. In our country, India, we have RBI as the central bank. So RBI has to supervise the investment activities of the banks. That is the reason why RBI has come out with certain legal impositions on the investment of banks. The legal impositions are such that the RBI has prescribed certain criteria for investment to be made by all the banking institutions in India, including the public sector, private sector, as well as foreign banks. And the legal requirements are such that RBI has imposed a restriction that minimum 25% of the total investable fund must have to be invested in government securities. By government securities, we mean the securities which are issued by the government for the purpose of raising funds from the market. So government at its time of requirement can issue certain securities in the form of government securities, which might be in the form of treasury bills, might be in the form of certain government bonds. Okay. So here the borrower is none other than the government, and particularly it is the central government. And being the banker to the government, ultimately it is the RBI which issues these securities to raise funds for the government. Now, because all the banking institutions are under the RBI control or under the RBI supervision, that is the reason why RBI can ask the banks to invest minimum 25% of their total investable fund on government securities. Here, since the government is the borrower, the possibility of loss becomes very less, or you might say that becomes zero. Because if the government borrows money, there is every possibility that the government will repay that. So, for ensuring the safety of the public fund, this legal provision is being imposed by the RBI, which all the banking institutions need to follow while framing the investment policy. The second provision is another 25% of the total investable fund must have to be invested in government approved securities. Government approved securities. There is a difference between government securities and government approved securities. Government approved securities means securities which are issued by government approved entities. That means by the government, various government departments, or by the public sector undertakings where the government is having the majority ownership. So here the central government is not directly taking the money. It is the departments under the central government or the public sector undertakings which are trying to raise the funds by issuing the securities. If suppose NTPC or ONGC or you can say public sector banks like SBI, BNP, all of them wants to raise funds from the market, then they can raise it by issuing their own securities. Though they are considered to be government approved securities. We call it as government approved because the government is having the majority ownership in such entities which are issuing these securities. Therefore, the chance of loss becomes very less in case of investment in these securities. As a result of which, the banks can ensure the safety of public funds. The third is 15% of the total investable fund. They need to invest in social and infrastructure sector. As you know, for the overall development of an economy, the development of the infrastructure is highly essential because infrastructure is considered to be the base for development. And those companies, those organizations which are involved in the infrastructure sector or which are a part of the infrastructure sector, they require funds from time to time. If the banks can go on to invest in infrastructure sector, because there is a possibility that the infrastructure will grow, the infrastructure sector will grow, it will not behave indifferently. Therefore, the return on such investments in these sectors will definitely be more. as well as the safety of funds is also there, because these are supposed to be the growing sector. Social sector means, as a part of social responsibility, the banks should go on to invest some of their money in some social sector organizations like NGOs, like providing finance to the you can say self-help groups, because social welfare or social empowerment is highly needed, and banks being a public institution needs to be a part of it, needs to contribute in some way or the other to ensure the social empowerment. So by providing or by investing in some NGOs or in some self-help groups or in some other social welfare activities, they can contribute in a positive way to the overall social empowerment. And in these sectors, when investment is to be made, in social sector, although return is not that much as compared to the infrastructure sector, but the fund is supposed to be more safe. The investable fund is supposed to be more safe. So 15% must have to be invested in social and infrastructure sector. The rest 35%, the banks are allowed to invest in corporate securities. By corporate securities, we mean the securities issued by the private companies. As all of you must have known the share market or the stock market, you can find that in the share market, the securities of the different private companies are actually being traded. And there is every possibility that you might gain a lot, and at the same time, there is a possibility that you might have to lose a lot. Because the stock market is always considered to be a volatile market. It is always considered to be a fluctuating market. At one point of time, it can go up, and the next point of time, it might go down. When it goes up, your return is supposed to be more or high. When it goes down, your return is supposed to be less. But since risk is there, therefore, the possibility of more return is also there. And banks, apart from being a public institution, since are considered to be commercial organizations, therefore, they need to invest in corporate securities in order to maintain their commerciality, in order to maintain their profitability. Because profitability is also one of the principles which the banks need to follow. But they cannot go on to invest in corporate securities arbitrarily. 35%, although of the total investable fund is allowed to be invested in corporate securities, but there is another norm being attached to it. Here, the total 35% of the total investable fund, which is to be invested in the corporate securities, it is to be invested in a 70 is to 30 proportion in favor of debt instruments. The securities are of two types. One is in the form of an equity, one is in the form of a debt. In equity, the chances of risk or the risk factor is more. In debt,
Excuse me, sir. In favor of
Sir, please, 7 is to 30% in the proportion of debt
debt instruments.
instruments. Okay, thank you.
That means out of this 35%, 70% of this 35% will have to be invested in debt instruments, 30% of this 35% will have to be invested in equity instruments. In equities, there is a high risk. But at the same time, there is a possibility of high return because the basic finance says that if risk is more, chances of return is also more. But in case of debt instruments, the risk factor is less. Accordingly, the return is also less. So in debt instruments, what happens? Different private companies, by issuing different debt instruments, also raise funds from the market. And in debt instruments, they are supposed to be the borrowers, and the risk factor is with them.
Sir, example of debt instrument, sir?
You can say that any bond, any debenture, those are considered to be the debt instruments. Commercial papers, which are issued by the private companies, different types of bonds or debentures, which are issued by the companies, those are debt instruments. Even government is also coming out with some bonds, those are also debt instruments. Bonds, debentures, commercial paper, these are considered to be the debt instruments. In debt instruments, actually, those who raise bonds, they are considered to be the borrower. They need to pay interest on that for a period for which they have taken the money. So here, although return is supposed to be less, but the investment is supposed to be more safe as compared to the investment in equities. Because in equities, although there is a chance of high profit, but at the same time, there is also a chance of high loss because of the volatility of the equity market. So the banks cannot go on to invest more on equities because it is a volatile market. So the banks cannot go on to invest more on equities, but definitely to ensure the profitability aspect or to ensure the profitability of the bank, the banks need to invest in equities. But whenever they go on to invest in equities, they need to invest 30% of these recommended 35% on equities, and 70% of this 35% they will have to invest in debts. So in this fashion, what will happen? The banks are supposed to get some return, no doubt, but more importantly, they can ensure the safety of the funds as they are dealing with public money. So they can ensure the safety of the funds. And wherever they go on to invest, they need to have a review and monitor. It is also one of the aspects of the investment policy. So simply by investing in these securities, they cannot sit idle. They need to review on a continuous basis. They need to monitor on a continuous basis so that they can assess whether the investment that they have made are performing as per their expectations or not. If at any point of time they find that the performance of the investment is not as per their expectation, they can go on to make a change in the investment policy. Suppose they have invested in some equities of some companies with the hope that they can get more return. But because the equity market is a volatile market, suppose after some time of investment they found that the company is going on a loss and the loss will carry over a period of time. That means the investment will not fetch that much of return to them which they have expected. So they can withdraw money from that and they can go on to invest in some other instruments or other equities or in equities of some other companies which they find that are performing well. So continuous review, continuous monitoring must have to be a component of the investment policy also. Okay.
Sir,
So
excuse me. Uh,
yeah,
Out of the total mobilized fund, what is the percentage bank are allowed to invest and rest are to keep it as a liquid fund?
for that there is no provision. Thing is that after lending money, whatever surplus they have, they can go on to invest that. As you know, there are certain provisions for which the banks need to keep certain portions in the form of reserve requirements. There are two different reserve requirements. One is your CRR, one is your SLR. Suppose CRR is 5%, SLR is 18%. And suppose as a bank, you have mobilized 100 rupees as deposits. So out of 100 rupees, you have to keep 5 rupees in the form of CRR and you have to keep 18 rupees in the form of SLR. So 23 rupees has gone. Now you have left in 73 rupees. 73 rupees. So, sorry, 73 to 77 rupees.
77.
77 rupees. Out of the
7,
77
7.
rupees, the priority of the bank is to provide lending to those who are in requirement of funds. So out of those 77 rupees, suppose you have lent money of 60 rupees. Now you are left with 17 rupees, so you can invest those 17 rupees. There is no clear-cut provision what percentage of the total deposits they will go on to invest. Because
Okay, sir.
because they know that if by lending they are supposed to get more return, and if their lending is supposed to be more safe, then why should they go on to invest? But investment is supposed to be made because the investment generates return, more return. And being a commercial institution, the banks need to ensure the profitability aspect also. Because if the banks do not run on profit, they cannot go on to win the trust and faith of their customers. And at the same time, they cannot go on to attract more customers. That is the reason why they need to invest. But what particular percentage of the total deposits mobilized they will go on to invest, there is no provision for this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So this is all about your investment policies. Clear? Now comes the loan policy. Loan policies of banks. Apart from investment, as I have already pointed out to you, that majority of the mobilized funds after meeting the reserve requirements are to be provided in the form of loans and advances. Because loan constitute the major source of income for the banks. And by providing loan, the banks help in meeting the credit requirement of the society, for which the banks actually have been set up, because it is the core function of banks. But they cannot go on to provide loan arbitrarily. Whoever comes to the bank asks for some loan, the bank will not go on to provide loan to that person. For that, certain precautions have to be taken. As the loan constitutes the major source of income, therefore, while providing loan, the bank has to follow a prudent loan policy. And for having a prudent loan policy, the banks need to follow certain steps. Because if a person comes, bank doesn't know that person, and bank automatically sanctions the loan against that person, chances are that the loan might get defaulted. If the loan gets defaulted, what will happen? There will be loss of money. And it is the public money, not the bank's money. So ultimately, who will suffer? The public will suffer. That is the reason why whenever the bank wants to provide loan or credit facility, it has to come out with a prudent loan policy. And there are certain key components of this loan policy. We will go on to discuss about those key components. The first and major component is the bank must have to ensure whether the prospective loanee to whom the loan is to be sanctioned is having the ability to repay the loan or not. If the loanee or prospective loanee doesn't have the ability to repay the loan, then automatically there is every chance that the loan will get defaulted. So the banks must have to take this into consideration seriously. So for that, the first and foremost component of the loan policy is your credit evaluation criteria. Credit evaluation criteria. That means they need to evaluate the credit on the basis of certain criteria. Whenever the prospective loanee asks for certain loans, the first and foremost thing that the loanee must have to disclose is the loan proposal form, in which the loanee will describe in detail for what purpose the loan is required, where the loan is supposed to be used, and all the financial details of the loanee itself. And through this, the banks will go on to find out the credit worthiness of the loan, whether the loanee is sufficiently credit worthy to repay the loan amount or not. So without evaluating the credit cannot be granted. First, the foremost thing is to evaluate the credit. And for that, every bank is having a credit department. And the role of the credit department is first of all to evaluate the credit proposal, which is in the form of a loan proposal. Whether it is business customers or it is individual customers, they have to furnish the loan proposal. If you are asking for an education loan, if you are asking for a housing loan, if you are asking for a vehicle loan, you need to disclose all these information in the loan proposal. And at the same time, as a prospective loanee, you need to disclose the financial details of yours. And many times, there are certain loans which are supposed to be secured loans. We can call it as the mortgage-based loans. So whether mortgage is supposed to be asked by the bank or not, what amount of mortgage is supposed to be taken against what amount of loan to be sanctioned. So those things have to be clear, first of all. On the basis of those criteria, the credit gets evaluated. So the first and foremost thing before the loan is being sanctioned is to evaluate the credit proposal. Therefore, this is the major component of the loan policy. The second component is your risk assessment and management. As I have pointed out that wherever you go to put your money, always there is some risk being attached to it. So whenever the banks are supposed to provide loans, they know the fact that each and every loan is attached with some risk. In some cases, the risk might be more. In some cases, the risk might be less. So the responsibility of the banks after evaluating the credit proposal is to assess what type of risk are being involved in the credit proposal, or what type of risk are being involved in that particular event or in that particular entity or which the loan is sought by the loan. After assessing the risk, they can go on to manage the risk. There are different types of risk which the banks might have to face. One such risk is your credit risk. Credit risk is nothing but the risk of default by the counterparty. Risk of default by the counterparty means what is the possibility that the borrower or the loanee will default on the loan. By assessing that, the loan amount is being fixed. Another such type of risk is your market risk. If suppose the bank is to provide a loan based on some mortgages, then automatically the mortgage asset is having some value at the time of giving the loan. And there is every chance that the mortgage value might go to depreciate on its value. If the loan gets defaulted, and you think that as a bank you can go on to use that asset, dispose it in the market and realize the loan, but by the time you go on to dispose it in the market, the value of the asset has gone down. So automatically there will be a loss on the loan also. So that aspect needs to be taken care of. So assessment of risk has to be made by the credit department. After assessing risk, where they have identified the types of risk, they can go on to manage those risks. How those risks can be managed, that thing has to be clear before the credit department, before they go on to sanction the loan. So this is the second component. Then third component is your
କୋଉଠି ହଁ ମୁଁ କାଲି ସବୁ ଅଗର ବାରଣ୍ଡା ମୁଁ କୋଉଠି ଏଠି ଖୁକୁଲି ବାଜିଲା କାଲି ବହି ବସି କାଲି ବାରଣ୍ଡା ବଇଛି ମୁଁ ସେଠି ପାହାଚ ବଇଛି ସବୁ ଯାକ ବଇଛି ଆଣିକି ଗୁଞ୍ଜିଛି ଗୁଣିଗାଳି
loan types and limits. As you know, there are different types of loan which can be provided by the banks. Because the customer is being segregated into two different categories. One is your business customer, one is your retail customer. Accordingly, the bank provides retail loans and business loans. There can be different types of retail loans because as per the requirement of the individual can ask for loan. So under retail loan, you can have the housing loan, you can have the four-wheeler loan, two-wheeler loan, you can have the education loan, you can have the personal loan, like that. These are considered to be retail loans. Under business loan, the business entities require loans either for the purpose of acquisition of fixed assets or for the purpose of financing current assets. So they can ask for term loan for acquisition of fixed assets, or they can ask for cash credit facilities, overdraft facilities, demand loan facilities for financing their current assets. So depending upon the type of loan, there is a limit on the loan. And the limit is also related to the credit worthiness of the customer. What is the capacity of the customer? What is the ability of the customer to repay the loan amount? On that also depends the loan limit. Suppose you are earning 40,000 rupees a month, so your annual income is 4.8 lakh. You are supposed to take a 5 years loan. So what should be the limit to be fixed on it? Now the banks over the years, out of their experience, has come to a conclusion that any individual can at best repay or can at best contribute 30% of its monthly income towards the repayment of the loan. So if your monthly income is 40,000, 30% of 40,000 comes about to be 12,000. So if you are trying to take a 5-year loan, in 1 year you can pay 1.44 lakh, and in 5 years at best you can pay 7.2. So the limits should be such which, along with the interest amount, should accumulate to 7.2 lakh in 5 years. So ultimately you can end up with a loan amount of 5.5 lakh to 6 lakh, not more than that. If you are asking for a loan more than 6 lakh, or let's suppose 10 lakh rupees, you cannot get that because your limit is not there. Your limit is 6 lakh rupees, not more than that. If 6 lakh rupees will be paid, given to you in the form of loan for a period of 5 years, then you can repay the loan as per your financial credit worthiness. Similarly, business entities, their capacity is also being judged while evaluating the credit on the basis of certain criteria. Accordingly, limit is also being fixed. You can think of the cash credit system, you can think of the overdraft system, you can think of the demand loan system, which all are taken by the business concerns for the purpose of financing for the current asset. And there is a limit being attached to all these type of loans. Although these loans are supposed to be provided for a period of 1 year because these are considered to be short-term loans, but a limit is being fixed. Up to that limit, you can use that account, not over and above that limit. So the loan types and limits has to be decided by the credit department, which is considered to be a component of the loan policy.
Sir, can we take non-fund based facility, credit facility also?
Yes, non-fund based credit facility is being given. If
Okay.
you think of the letter of credit, it's a non-fund based facility.
That is only for eligibility for organization, not for individual. Am I right, sir?
That is not all organizations, but for commercial entities.
Commercial entity. Okay. Not applicable for individual. Am I right, sir?
Applicable for individuals.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Hmm.
the
But
PPT, sir, ଆମେ ପାଇବୁ କି? BIM ର?
PPT I have not prepared. I am giving you the notes which lucidly I have written, all the units. You will definitely feel comfortable to go through those notes. It is much more beneficial than the PPTs. Then fourth one is your interest rates and fees. So the credit department, before going on to provide loan, have to decide about the interest rate, as well as have to decide about the fees it is supposed to take. Because there are certain types of loans on which the fees actually is being taken by the banks. So interest rates, what interest rate will be applicable to what type of loan, that is to be decided by the credit department before they go on to approve the loan. Because this is the major part. This is the rate at which the banks are supposed to get the return. And the banks arbitrarily cannot fix these rates. As you know, it is the RBI which from time to time has come out with different interest rates for different loans. But nowadays, because the banks have more independent, they can decide upon the deposit rates. They can also decide upon the interest rate, but there is an upper limit to the interest rate on loans. They cannot go beyond that. They have to manage within that. And generally, since loan is the major source of income, the interest rate is supposed to be slightly higher in case of loans. What type of loans you might take, you can find that the interest rate on the loans are slightly higher. So for what type of loan, what should be the interest rate to be fixed, that has to be decided before the loan gets approved. This is also one of the key components of the loan policy, because the bank on the beginning or in the beginning or from the beginning must have to be clear about the interest rates, because this interest rate also has to be accepted by the loan. The bank cannot go on to make any changes in the interest rate. Sometimes there is a fixed interest rate which will be fixed over the time period for which the loan is to be approved, and sometimes the interest rate gets fluctuated. It's a fluctuating interest rate in the sense that there is no clear-cut indication whether the interest rate is being fixed at 5% or 6%. It can vary in between 4 to 6%, in between 5 to 7%, like that, or as per the market. After doing all these things, the credit department will then go on to approval of loan approval process. This is the fifth component. Once the credit gets evaluated through the credit proposal, once the risk gets assessed and the wage how the risk can be managed is being identified, once the type of loan is being decided and the limits on those type of loans is being decided, once the interest rate is being fixed, the credit department can go on to approve the loan. And for that, the credit department gives it in writing to the head office. Then the head office will transmit that to the branch office. Because in banks, you can find that in every branch, there is a limit for the branch manager. Up to that limit, the branch manager on his own can provide the loan. Depending upon the type of branch, whether it is a scale 3 branch or scale 4 branch or scale 5 branch, the loan limit basically gets an increase. In a scale 1 branch, the loan limit might be 10 lakh, but in a scale 4 branch, the loan limit might be 50 lakhs. It means that whoever is the branch manager of a scale 4 branch, the branch manager has the independence to provide loans up to 50 lakh rupees on his own. The risk he solely takes. But beyond that, they have to take the approval from the regional office or from the zonal office. Thing is that once the credit department clears all these components, they go on to approve the loan and the process starts. And once the loan gets approved, it will be intimated to the customer or to the loan. Because once the loan gets approved, there is the requirement of certain documentations. Because on the basis of credit proposal form only these things have been identified. Once the loan gets approved, there is the requirement of certain documentation, there is the requirement of investigating certain facts which have been disclosed in the credit proposal form. So the loan approval process begins. Once the loan approval process is over, then the bank can go to disburse that loan. So loan disbursement. And monitoring. Loan disbursement means disbursing the loans or releasing the loan amount. Basically, loan disbursal means the final release of the loan. Many times you can find that there are certain types of loans where on a phase manner the loan amount is being given. Suppose you are asking for a housing loan of 10 lakh rupees. So in the credit proposal, you have to give the information in how many months you are supposed to make the payment to the you can say builder. So if it is 2 months or 6 months or 7 months, then on an installment basis the loan will be provided to you. So that is not considered to be loan dispersal. Loan dispersal means final release of the loan. Once loan gets dispersed, the repayment starts from there. If you are thinking of an education loan, suppose you are trying to take an education loan for a course which is of 2 years duration. Now, in how many installments you have to make payment to the college authorities or to the university authorities, that is to be disclosed by you or by the college authorities. So, if it is on a semester basis, then every semester, whatever required amount is there, that will be discharged to you, or that will be disbursed to you, or released to you. Once the final disbursal takes place, then the repayment starts. Otherwise, repayment doesn't start before the final dispersal of the loan. So once loan gets disbursed, the responsibility of the bank is to monitor whether the loanee is supposed to pay back the funds or not. That thing you need to monitor. So they cannot sit idle. Then comes the loan repayment terms. You cannot go on to repay the loan amount at once. As per your convenience, as per the convenience of the loanee, the loan repayment has to be made. So the loanee can ask for a monthly repayment scheme. The loanee can ask for a bi-monthly repayment scheme. The loanee can ask for a quarterly repayment scheme, for a semi-annual repayment scheme, for an annual repayment scheme, or for a bulk repayment scheme. So, in what way the repayment of the loan will be paid? For that, the terms and conditions has to be set. And whether as per the terms the loan is being repaid or not, that has to be monitored by the credit department. Because loan repayment terms basically has to be accepted by the loan, and terms and conditions are being set by taking into consideration the convenience of the loan. As for the convenience of the loaning, the loan repayment terms is being set. That is the reason why monitoring is highly essential. Whether as per the loan repayment terms, the loan is getting repaid or not, that the credit department must have to find out. The last is review and revision. Through monitoring, review is being made. Once installment repayment of loan takes place, you have to review whether on a continuous basis the installment payment is being paid or not. Because there can be many situations where the loanee at some point of time might not be in a position to pay one or two installment repayment of loan. So what will happen? Through review, if they find that the loanee has defaulted on making 2-3 installment repayments, they will have to call the loanee. They will have to find out what is the reason behind it, and if possible, they can go on to make some changes in the terms. That means revisions has to be made. Suppose you have initially given your consent to make repayment on a monthly basis, but because of some exigencies, because of some mishappenings, you are not in a position to make repayment of loans on a monthly basis. Rather, you are asking for a bulk payment and try to close the loan. So, revision can be made in the you can say that terms, loan repayment terms, revision can be made. So these are the different components on the basis of which we can clearly find out in what way the loan policy of a bank can be framed. Got it? Got it or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Thank you all.
yes, sir.
Thank you all. Tomorrow we'll discuss the other parts which is there in your second.
So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
After
Thank you, sir.
completion of this module, I will provide you the notes of this module.
Sure, sir.
Have you all got the first unit module? Because those who
Yes.
have given me the WhatsApp number,
Yes,
I have
sir.
already sent
Got it, sir. Got it.